What's up everyone? I hope you're all doing fine today and welcome back to my channel, and there's gonna be another live rant or live discussion that we're gonna do today. And we're gonna be talking about one of the most pressing in fact, and hottest issues in the world. And this is of course the Taliban crisis after the American pullout that created power vacuum in this godforsaken and embattled country. So, as we all know, over the past few days, after the pullout of the Biden administration military of Afghanistan, the Taliban group that has been lurking in the background for 20 years or more than 20 years are back in power. They're back in power, and before that, I'm just gonna be flexing my eyewear. Isn't it cool, right? So it's gonna be really fitting to our discussion for today. So basically, we've heard that a lot of world leaders from Europe, of course, the Great Britain, Germany, and other countries are furious. They're so mad at the incompetence of the creepy pedo Joe Biden administration for causing this crisis in the region, not just in Afghanistan, but of course in the region, because this power vacuum that America has created because of its irresponsible and disastrous pullout is going to lead to anarchy, power struggle, and war. So I don't know if this was intentional on the part of the Biden administration. We've seen and heard and watched so far Biden's latest lies about this crisis that he just created, because as we all know, a month ago he was trying to assure the fake news media, American fake news media, and the global fake news media that everything was taken care of. There's not going to be any crisis after the pullout, that they were able to account for everything, especially in making sure that there's not going to be anyone left behind, and that they're going to be bringing all the equipment and the installations back to America. So if we're gonna check so far, we've seen that President creepy pedo Joe Biden has been blaming President Trump, all right, for this crisis that he had created. And we've seen so far that China is now lurking in the background. So it first lurked in the background, and now it's playing a big role in this new order in Afghanistan. So China is like a vulture that is going to benefit. We hope that it's going to benefit, because definitely it's going to be a really disastrous order in Afghanistan, just like the disaster that the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran had created in 1979, when the European powers installed the Ayatollah as the new leader in Iran. So it's really a big issue, but basically what we're going to talk about, because I haven't heard and seen any Filipino commentarists or intellectuals talking about this. It's a really complicated issue. I would like to really check and discuss and talk about the impact of this power vacuum in the potential Chinese occupation. I'm gonna say occupation or partnership with Taliban in Afghanistan on the region, especially in the whole Asia as a continent. So is it gonna impact not just the region, but also Chinese relations in the Southeast Asia, especially the whole Asian continent? We don't know yet, but as we've seen so far, China has been doing some initial moves in order to partner with Afghanistan, the Taliban government. So basically, we've seen that a few countries have already welcomed the new Taliban regime as the quote-unquote official government of this embattled country. But there are things that we need to consider really before we get to the main issue that I would like to talk to you about, which is the Chinese expansion in the West Philippine Sea and its threat to invade Taiwan. So we've heard so far, we've seen the news. These are official news, okay? I don't just trust the American media, but I've seen so far some news from Japan and in Asia, news outlets in Asia, confirming that China indeed made threats of invading or reoccupying, Taiwan, because we all know that Taiwan is like the quote unquote province of China. So things that we need to consider, of course, is that this power vacuum that Biden or disastrous Biden pullout created has exposed the weakness of America, and that's the reason why China is so happy that America has humbled. So we have a news about this actually, that China is happy to see America is humbled in Afghanistan. So it does not love the Taliban, but it is ready to do business with them. So it refers to America. The it refers to not America, but China. China loves to do business with the Taliban. So we're going to be speaking about oil, because Afghanistan is definitely rich in natural resources. So just like the Iraq war again, so it was America that spent a lot of money, hundreds of billions of money for the Iraq war and the resulting occupation of Iraq. And we all know that because of Iraq, the Afghanistan was also invaded, because according to George Bush and his intel men, that they were like harboring or protecting Osama bin Laden. That's the reason why America had to also invade Afghanistan. So after this invasion and occupation of Iraq, so it turned out that China became the beneficiary, all right, became the oil partner of the new government of Iraq. So same story with the latest pullout of the U.S. of Afghanistan. So China is going to be the beneficiary of this pullout. So that's one thing. Another thing is that China and Russia are going to fill the power vacuum that America has created. And this reminds us of the hostage crisis in Iran in 1979, right, during the Carter era. And that's the reason why Ronald Reagan won the presidency against Carter. And one thing that we need to consider, of course, is that the U.S. weapons and equipment and installations that Biden-led, military left in Afghanistan, what's going to happen to them? So imagine, the crisis that can create in terms of China and Russia trying to reverse engineer those military technologies that Biden military left in Afghanistan. So that's one thing. And I've heard and seen some comments so far online that a lot of people all over the world are worried that China and Russia are, including of course the Taliban terrorist organization, are going to benefit from this left behind equipment, military equipment and technologies. And this is going to be another Iran, right? Iran. Okay, what I mean by that is that, as we all know, the 1979 revolution in Iran led to the ascendancy of the Ayatollah administration or regime, right? The cleric regime. But of course, Iran is different from the Taliban, because Iran is a Shia dominated country, whereas Afghanistan is a Sunni dominated country. So this is one thing that we need to learn as well in order for us to understand the conflict in the Middle East. Why is it that Iran is the enemy of others, countries in the region, in the Middle East, like Iran versus Saudi Arabia, Iran versus UAE, etc. And they are both Muslims. It's because we have what we call Shia and Sunni Muslims. And if we're going to check further, since Taliban is a Sunni Muslim organization, the majority of Muslims in the Philippines are Sunni. And in fact, the Jemaah Islamiyah, Maote, Muslim terrorist groups, and other terror groups in the Philippines are allied, or they're like pledging allegiance to Al Qaeda and the Taliban, right? So these are things that we're going to discuss in the future probably. And I don't know whether, again, like I said, whether this is intentional on the part of the Biden administration. We've heard so far his lies or reasoning as to whether he did this disastrous and irresponsible pull out, that we need to pull our military out of the region. We cannot rule Afghanistan forever. I agree, all right? I agree that it's impossible to govern Afghanistan, considering that this country, including other countries in the Middle East, has been at war not just for centuries but for 1,000 of years, right? Because of religion. That's one thing that some other, so-called intellectuals and commentators need to understand. This is not just about politics or about land or real estate. This is actually about culture and religion. And I've seen this video of Lee Kuan Yew saying, this is not about conflict really. It's actually about culture. If I may need to further interpret his statements on his interview with Charlie Ross. And another thing that we need to consider is the impact of this power struggle, the power vacuum, and then power struggle on the region and in Southeast Asia and the whole continent of Asia as well. So how it's going to impact the relations in our Southeast Asian region, and is it going to embolden China? Because we've seen that China has been making some bold moves in order to partner with the Taliban, and we've seen so far that a lot of people in China were like concerned, but not really people, but some kind of establishments or news outlets, probably the state media. They were concerned that why is it that you are partnering with a terrorist group that has linked to Eastern Turkestan, which has been blamed for the terrorist attack in one of Chinese provinces. Alright, so I said earlier that the Taliban is a Sunni Muslim group, and that Afghanistan is a Sunni dominated country, just like the Philippines, which is a Sunni dominated Muslim country as well. So what we have here in the Philippines are mostly Sunni Muslims, and the difference between Shia and Sunni Muslims is that the Sunni Muslims follow the examples of the Prophet of Muhammad, whereas the Shia Muslims follow the familial lineage of the Prophet. I've heard that it's the cousin of Muhammad. So as we can see, most Sunni countries are ruled by monarchs or royals. Saudi Arabia, for example, UAE, etc. But of course, we've seen so far that Iran, formerly Persia, is also ruled by, or was ruled by, royals. The deposed Pahlavi, royals, they were ousted after the 1979 revolution in Iran, and that Iran was replaced with a theocratic clerical regime ruled by the Ayatollah. So that's the difference really. But if we're gonna check so far on the history of Afghanistan, so Afghanistan was like a battlefield in the region. So first it was occupied by Russia, and Russia was funding the communists, Muslims. I don't know if they're Muslims, but definitely they're communists. Probably a mixture of communist and secularist. And there were Mujahideen fighters that were fighting against the Russian occupation, and of course their communist allies in Afghanistan. So that was the Cold War era. And as we've learned so far in history, if you've read recent history, the American government, the American military funded these mujahideen groups in Afghanistan in order to use them as proxy war machines against the Soviet soldiers or imperialists in Afghanistan. So that's why we have all these rumors, not really rumors, but actually factual information that Al Qaeda was funded by America. But of course, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, as we've heard that adage before, and it's really understandable that why America did that. But of course, that was a recent history that has become history, and now America is being blamed for its mistakes in the past. So, in 1989, after the fall of Soviet Russia, that's when anarchy, anarchy ruled Afghanistan. So there were wars and conflicts between several groups, the Mujahideen groups against other groups. So just like what's happening today, but the only difference is that the Taliban had to fight with other groups trying to claim power in Afghanistan, whereas today all Taliban had to do is march towards Kabul and take over. That's all they did. So as we've seen so far throughout history, whenever there is power vacuum left by America or any other imperialist country, expect power struggle to follow, and the spoils of war is gonna go to the victors or winners of that struggle. So in 1996, the victor of the power struggle left by Soviet Russia was the Taliban, and Taliban ruled up until 2001. Okay, up until 2001, and they were deposed because of, as we all know, the American invasion following the Iraq War invasion. So America occupied that country for 20 years, and America spent 500 to more than $1 trillion. I don't know if that's the accurate figure, probably more than $1 trillion. Imagine that. Only to see today that amount of money, huge amount of money, investment, etc., went down the drain because of creepy pedo Joe Biden's incompetence. Imagine that. So America and American taxpayers invested in something that turned out to be total failure 20 years later. All right. So a lot of people were trying to blame Biden, Trump, Obama, Bush, etc. But one thing is for sure, okay? Between Obama, Bush, and Biden, it's only President Donald Trump who understands that the occupation of Afghanistan was a mistake. America should not have occupied Afghanistan, and he believes that America cannot be a global cup forever. That's impossible. So he understands that this occupation, or what we call nation building, costs a lot of money, billions up to trillions. And now it turns out that the vulture that's gonna benefit from all of this is China. China benefited from America's pullout of Iraq All right. So history is repeating itself, and thanks to the incompetence and idiocy and the weak administration of creepy pedo Joe Biden, he didn't just cause power struggle and then a new order that's definitely inimical to other countries' interests in the region. He also caused one of the world's disasters pull out that's gonna probably precipitate war and conflict in the region and the whole continent of Asia. So that's the reason why I'll be linking this crisis, the Afghan crisis, to the Chinese expansion in the region, in the Southeast Asian region, in the West Philippine Sea, because we've seen so far that China was loving what's going on, really, because the Chinese communists in Beijing understand that they can make money off this, like they did after the pullout of U.S. In Iraq, and we've seen so far that it's beginning to do some kind of partnership agreements with the Taliban government. But this is some kind of contradiction because we all know that China has been like oppressing some Muslim ethnic groups in China. I mean, the Chinese government or the communist government has been oppressing these Uyghurs, the Chinese Uyghurs, who are Sunnis as well. Sunnis. And if we say Sunnis, they are in alliance with, or they pledge allegiance to any Sunni groups, whether we call them terrorist groups or separatist groups in the world. So like this news so far, so China's warm welcome for Taliban sparks backlash at home. So that's one thing that Chinese rulers have to consider, because they all know that Taliban has been allied with other Sunni terrorist and separatist groups, like of course the East Turkestan Islamic movement that has been blamed for a terrorist attack in Xinjiang. So I don't know what's gonna happen, but this is really exciting, to be honest with you. And another thing is that China sees to make a lot of profit from its partnership with the Taliban. But another thing that we need to consider is the fact that because of this crisis created by America in the region, right, China has become emboldened and even threatened to invade Taiwan. All right. So according to this news from PBS NewsHour, Taiwan's foreign minister says China is preparing for war. So according to Taiwan's foreign minister Joseph Wu, I think Beijing has been preparing for war against Taiwan, and that is what we've been seeing. They are preparing for it. If you look at the number of sorties, it's around 2,900 times that last year. So the threat has been increasing. And when we examine in a closer way, the Chinese sometimes even cross the middle line of the Taiwan Strait. And also, experts say that China has been using this crisis in Afghanistan to portray America under creepy pedo Joe Biden as weak and unreliable, to draw China, or not China, but Taiwan closer. And definitely, China can also use this propaganda talking point with the Philippines, as we've been having this military or territorial dispute with China for some time. But the problem is the Philippine president has been proving to be a Chinese lackey or puppet. And in fact, just recently, the president of the Philippines, President Rodrigo Duterte, thanked a Chinese Xi for donating millions of doses of Sinovac to the Philippines. And it's really unfortunate, really, and ironic that the so-called bully president, the strong man Duterte, is afraid of China. Of course, psychologically, we know that a bully is afraid of a bigger bully, because that bully is nothing but a cowardly maniac. Just like a bully, all the turtle can do is oppress and attack and take on the weak and defenseless. But when it comes to a bigger bully like China, he's afraid. He's cowering in fear. And this is one proof that we have a bully but cowardly Chinese puppet president who's been kissing Chinese President Xi's ass for some times or for 3 years. So going back to China's partnership with the Taliban, and of course China's bullying in the Southeast Asian region, history is gonna tell us as to whether China is going to be the Taliban group's karma. I don't know what's gonna happen, whether Taliban is gonna have some conflict with its new Chinese rulers or partners, because these two groups are fundamentally opposites to each other. There's only one thing that's keeping them together, and that is their disdain of America. But we all know that China is oppressing Sunni Uyghurs in its territory in China, and that the Uyghurs in China and the Taliban have one thing in common. They are both Sunni Muslims, and all Sunni Muslims in the world, technically, they pledge allegiance to these separatist Sunni groups, the Jamaah Islamiyah, the Eastern Turkestan fundamentalist groups near China, Al Qaeda, etc. These are all Sunni groups, and probably they're just bidding time in order to become more powerful in the future. And of course, we all know that each group has its own interest. But let's listen to Singapore's founder Lee Kuan Yew's prediction that sounds eerily similar with the prediction of President Trump prior to all of this.
I'm not saying the Middle East is a distraction. I think trying to make a country out of Afghanistan is a distraction. There was no country for the last 30, 40 years. They've just been fighting each other since the last king was chased out.
Right.
How on earth are you going to put these little bits together? It's not possible.
So therefore you do what?
I'm not an expert, but in my simple mind, it strikes me that you won in Iraq, you won in Afghanistan, not because you fought the Taliban, but because you got the Northern Alliance to fight them.
Exactly.
And you provided the Northern Alliance with intelligence and the capabilities to bomb them and target them. And they captured the South. Oh.
You know, I love the humility of Lee Kuan Yew here. He understands the difficulty of occupying a country or a culture that has been at war for centuries or even for 1,000 of years, right? These people have been fighting against each other for centuries, really, and it's really impossible to occupy them. It's like occupying a new alien race that has its distinct culture or identity, because these people have its very distinct identity that is different from the rest of the world. Okay, these are fundamentalists. These are motivated by religion, and we cannot really compare these people, the Muslim fundamentalists, with the Catholics, because, for example, the Catholics are not as fundamentalists as this group who have been fighting to have their own Islamic territory. So they would like to have Islamic regime ruled by the words of the Quran. All right, that's different from say the Philippines, that is dominated by Catholics, but the Catholics do not want to have a theocratic government that is going to rule all over the Philippines, right? So that's the difference. He understands, Lee Kuan Yew understands the difficulty of occupying, a Muslim land, really. And that's what President Trump has had said as well, years prior to the disastrous pullout of Biden, right? Trump has been warning America and the world that we cannot be a global cap forever. Now remember, I talk about whether this is purely due to creepy pedo Joe Biden's incompetence or this is intentional. I mean the pullout of Afghanistan, because I strongly believe that this disastrous pullout that led to power vacuum and power struggle in the region is going to cause military conflicts, not only in the region but also in Asia. So for example, let's look at this report that was released today. So number one, expedite delivery of military equipment to Taiwan. So they would like, or America would like to, I don't know if they're gonna really willing to help Taiwan against China, because America has been like a lackey of China. We all know that President Creepy Peter Joe Biden got bribed by the communists, right? So we've been hearing about this bribery, multi-billion-dollar bribery of Biden and his son Hunter, right? Second, so this is coming from the experts, really, redeploy American troops to the Pacific. So, okay, hold on. So are you saying now, because Biden has been telling us, has been lying to the world that, we cannot stay in Afghanistan forever. So are you saying that that so-called pullout that turned out to be disastrous is going to cause another round of American militarization in Asia? All right, under the guise that we need to protect Taiwan and other countries from China. Is that what you're saying now? Because China has been like mocking America after this disastrous pullout, right? That it's been happy that America has been humbled in Afghanistan. And number three, we're gonna check only on the very important pointers. Post diplomats to Kiribati, Nauru, Tonga, and Tuvalu, and forward basing the Polar Star in Australia. So basically, this is like a grand design to benefit the warmongers, the Democrat donors in America, because we all know that the deep state is like more aligned with the Democrats, and they were all anti-Trump, right? So I mean, imagine if these were like a novel plot, right? So, creepy pedo Joe Biden, installed by the deep state via a fortified election, all right? Probably, they know that creepy pedo Joe Biden is like a disaster when it comes to foreign relations and international relations as well. But they all know as well that creepy pedo Joe Biden is like a megalomaniac narcissist with worsening mental state. So they help install creepy pedo Joe Biden because they know that he's too stupid, a moron, to rule America. And they will let creepy pedo Joe Biden commit mistakes like this one, because we all know that according to news, really, over the past few hours and days, that the Biden administration was warned about the disaster that his stupid pullout could cause in Afghanistan. But despite all that, Biden still continued with the pullout. And now, these so-called experts, military experts, are asking and urging Biden to continue to militarize and to expand its occupation across Asia. What a grand deceptive design. And because they now know that Biden is so vulnerable, all right, it's so vulnerable that even his vice president Kamala Harris is afraid to talk to the media. So we've heard so far that his Vice President Kamala Harris is going to visit Vietnam and Taiwan in order to assure these countries and of course its allies that America is still in charge. That move is actually almost the same as Kamala's visit in El Paso in order to tell the American publics that, hey, America's borders are safe. But the problem is El Paso is like 900 miles away from the real borders in Texas. So is Kamala Harris going to Taiwan instead of Afghanistan in order to assure American allies that we are still in charge. Trust us because we're too stupid. So I mean, I don't know, it's like a conspiracy theory, but basically that's probably what's gonna happen in the future. There's gonna be militarization of the Democrats in the region in order to benefit the warmongers, the war industry in America, because we know so far, and I can predict that the power vacuum and the power struggle and the installation of Taliban in Afghanistan is going to cause military conflict in that region. And that's going to affect other countries in Asia as well. And as we all know, China has been doing some great moves in order to show to the world that we are now in charge and America is not going to be your ally. America is going to abandon you just like the way it abandoned Afghanistan. So now we're going to pivot to the issue of West Philippine Sea or South China Sea. So there was a move of China trying to establish power posturing, as we would like to call it, in the Middle East, in Afghanistan. So China has been doing some business in Iraq and now in Afghanistan. We're going to talk about oil, really. Now, just recently, as I discussed so far, China's been trying to tell Taiwan that, I'm your only ally left in this continent because America is going to abandon you. And that same propaganda statement is going to resonate across Asia, especially in Southeast Asia, because we all know that nearly all of these Southeast Asian countries are having some territorial tiff or dispute with China. The Philippines, for example, except that President Duterte, abandoned Philippines' territorial dispute with China. I don't know what's going to happen to that, except that all we can say is that we've been seeing Chinese territorial expansion in the region over the past few months since the installation via fortified election of creepy pedo Joe Biden. So just like the Taliban, really, China has been waiting for President Trump to be deposed. And President Trump, according to Time magazine, a liberal news rag, a liberal propaganda outlet, Time magazine has been bragging proudly in its blockbuster news report that, hey, we the elite, the liberal elite, big tech, fake news, etc., were able to oust and depose Trump via a fortified election and install creepy pedo Joe Biden. So this is basically what they got from installing a puppet to have an unstable Middle East again and unstable Asia. So according to this news, for example, China's military surveillance ship, this was in June, aircraft spotted at contested South China Sea reef. So it's been doing this military expansion in the region since the installation of creepy pedo Joe Biden. So if we're going to read this report, as the U.S. attempts to pivot its national security focus to the Pacific, the situation in the South China Sea continues to grow more complex. China claims almost the entire area as its own and has running territorial disputes with nearly all of its neighbors. including the Philippines, of course, while tensions remain high in part due to the presence of a more aggressive People's Liberation Army Navy. Imagery reveals China building full-blown military bases in disputed seas. So, of course, it's going to include the West Philippine Sea. I would like to reiterate that it's our territory, the West Philippine Sea. So, new satellite imagery points to China building full-blown military bases on artificial islands in the South China Sea. Construction of radar antenna mounts on Mischief Reef could be part of a military installation, a report by geospatial software company Similarity claims. So, why the hell China would like to have all of this? So, China has been trying to establish partnership in the Middle East. As we all know, the Middle East is an oil-rich territory. All right, Afghanistan, Iraq, they are all rich when it comes to oil production. Now, China would also like to dominate and control the West Philippine Sea because of its impact on global trade. So that's the reason why we have this militarization. I wouldn't like to call it West Philippine Sea. So this is where all this trade, oil trade, etc., is gonna happen. So if we're gonna check on this report, this very interesting report that I would like to share with you why China would like to control the West Philippine Sea.
The South China Sea encompasses 1.4 million square miles, making it almost 1.5 times bigger than the Mediterranean Sea. It's a key commercial gateway that sees 1/3 of the world's maritime shipping pass through it every year, accounting for more than $3 trillion in trade. Beneath the surface, the maritime life is vital to the diets and economies of the surrounding nations. Around 12% of the global fish catch comes from these waters, which also hosts more than half of the world's fishing vessels. Even further down, beneath the seabed, is the promise of natural gas and crude oil reserves. The exact amount is disputed, with both the US and China giving vastly different estimates. The US estimates that the sea holds about 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 11 billion barrels of oil.
South China Sea, it's a strategic crossroads really. It links on one side the Pacific and the other side the Indian Ocean, and then north to China and south to Australia. Huge amounts of world trade go through, huge amounts of oil, most of the things that we buy in the shops.
The Chinese communists understand that he who controls the West Philippine Sea controls global trade. All right, and that's the reason why China is so adamant, so determined to occupy these naval territories, these oceanic territories in the region, because the Chinese rulers in Beijing know that it's gonna make China the superpower in the future.
Brunei, Malaysia, the Philippines, Taiwan, and Vietnam all have claims in the region. But it's China's claims that are the most contentious. China claimed more than 80% of the South China Sea.
Well, not to mention the rare earth metal industry that China now controls.
Island.
China's claim in the South China Sea emerged between 1907 and 1947, in those 40 years. And it really emerged in the context of China struggling against the foreign powers in the first half of the 20th century. Against Japan, and then later against France, and then against Japan again during the Second World War. It became an emotional question. It became a time when China wanted to stand up against the world, and one way of doing that was by staking a claim to territory.
But Beijing didn't start actively asserting this claim until later in the 20th century.
It's really when oil...
Well, definitely, China has no claim. If we're gonna look at the map, China has no claim at all. The only leverage that China has it's strong military influence, and the fact that it can bribe international bodies just like it did with the WHO, or World Health Organization. So in conclusion, all right, what I'm trying to say is that America under creepy Peter Joe Biden made everything a disaster after the pullout, or after the ouster of President Trump via what Time magazine called fortified election. So we've seen so far, all right, that under Trump, China was behaved as a nation, right? In fact, it was President Trump who led an investigation into the possibility that this coronavirus actually leaked from the Wuhan labs, but that was shut down by creepy pedo Joe Biden. Yes, probably you haven't heard this from your local news, because the local news in the Philippines are simply relying on liberal news wires from America. All right, all this propaganda. But the truth is, okay, creepy pedo Joe Biden shut down this investigation started by President Trump. Now, why do I sound like I'm against American occupation, imperialism, etc.? Yes, I'm against American or any type of occupation, whether it be by China, Russia, America. And that is the position of President Trump. Trump has been against American imperialism. He didn't want, or he doesn't want to have America become a global cup. But then that sounds like contradicting the reality that we have today, that China is expanding in Asia. And some people might say that the only way to counter that is to have America have an existing occupation, military installations in Asia. I'm going to say no. What we only have is America as an independent nation, America that's not gonna meddle, really, just like what Trump did. And because of that, China became behaved. But the only problem is, unlike America, which is ruled by two political parties every 4 years, China can plan long term, just like these Islamic regimes. They can plan long term. But the model created by Trump during his 4-year administration shows that by America behaving like a strong country, a country that is more focused on trade than nation building, China can be neutralized. And that's what President Trump did. And that's actually the best model. We don't have to, approve of one country having its military might present in some region like Asia or the Southeast Asia in order to counter the influence of another hostile empire, that is China. So that's all I have today. If you like this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And this is again Politically Incorrect Asian Vlog, and have a good one to all of you.